There are many minds in circulation.
I call the regular meeting of the Lakewood City Council of September 28th, 2015 to order. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Murphy?
Here.
Shakti? Here. Ellen?
Here.
Johnson?
Here.
Wickman? Paul? Here. Harrison?
Here.
Quinn?
Here.
Coop?
Here.
Fairway?
Here.
Roybal?
Here.
You have a quorum.
I'd like to take the chair's privilege and wish my daughter Erin a happy 33rd birthday today. She's a teacher and worked all day, and she's out campaigning for a cause she cares very much about tonight. So that's typical of her. But on behalf of Mom and Dad and Cole, happy birthday, Erin. As we go to our typical rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a silent prayer, I'd like to turn it over to our Council President, Karen Harrison. Councilor Wickman is missing tonight, and she'd like
We
to
just want to wish Dave and his family the very best. He has gone to Atlanta to be with his sister, who is very gravely ill right now. So at the time we have a moment of silence, if you would put him in your thoughts and prayers, I'd really appreciate it. Thank you.
With that, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the silent prayer. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please be seated. The clerk, please read item 4 into the record.
Item 4, proclamation, Go-Tober Month.
Hold on a second. I can have it like just 1 second. Hold on. Oh,
It's not always the smoothly oiled machine we hope for, and I take blame for that. This proclamation, Councilor Quinn asked us to put forth this evening, and I wanted Councilor Quinn to read it, and neglected to tell him late this afternoon. So, Tom, we're
Quite
on
all right.
for the proclamation.
Always ready.
Always ready. I'd like to ask our sustainability manager, Jonathan Wachtel, to come down, and from what I understand, please keep your distance. Right? You got a little cold. Fighting off a little something. Okay. No, that's you come to the microphone. Tom.
Okay. Proclamation, October 15th, 2015, as Go-Tober Month. Whereas the Way to Go program of the Denver Regional Council of Governments is piloting an employer commuter challenge during October called Go-Tober. And whereas the challenge is to encourage those who primarily drive alone to work to try new, smarter ways to commute during the entire month of October. And whereas 25 companies in the metro area with 100 or more employees have been challenged to get as many of their employees as possible to commute smarter at least 4 times a month. And whereas the employees are encouraged to walk, bicycle, carpool, vanpool, or take light rail or the bus to work. And whereas Go-Tober is designed to reduce traffic congestion, improve air quality, and encourage sustainable transportation choices. And whereas Lakewood is participating in the Go-Tober Challenge as an active partner with Dr. Cog. And whereas the city encourages a multimodal transportation system and has adopted the goal of increasing sustainable transportation choices in Lakewood in its sustainability plan. And whereas Go-Tober will assist with fostering changes outlined in the sustainability plan, including reducing daily per capita vehicle miles traveled by 10% by 2025 and decreasing trips to work by single occupancy vehicles from 75% to 65% by 2025. Now, therefore, on behalf of the City Council and the people of the City of Lakewood, I, Bob Murphy, Mayor of the City of Lakewood, Colorado, by virtue of the authority vested in me, do hereby recognize October 2015 as Go-Tober Month in Lakewood and encourage all Lakewood residents to take part in commuting in smarter ways during October and beyond. Given under my hand and seal of the City of Lakewood this 20th day of October 2015, Bob Murphy, Mayor.
Again, I'll turn it over to Jonathan Wachtell, Sustainability Manager. Thank you for all the great work you do, and here's the proclamation.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. Mayor and City Council, thank you very much for making room for this proclamation and for your support on this program. As the proclamation said, this is a challenge to our employees, the City of Lakewood, to choose 4 days during the month of October where they use an alternative method to get to work. It supports the goals adopted in the Sustainability Plan last May. And it's always exciting to start implementing that plan. Employees will be able to track their commutes and receive awards through the month. And this is a program set up by the Regional Council of Governments. And I just want to make note that the My Way to Go website is open for anybody to use. So I would encourage anybody who's interested to go check it out. You can put in your address and your typical work commute. It'll give you all the options on how you could get to work in various ways. It'll show you the calories you could burn if you take certain choices. It'll show you the carbon emissions associated with other choices. It'll even find you matches for carpooling. So if there's someone else going to within a very small radius of your home going to a similar workplace, it'll match you to, and you can connect with each other and find ways to share rides. So it's a really great program, and this is our chance to get Lakewood City staff to start using it. And I want to illustrate this with a couple of stats on the amount of impact even small choices like this can have. So if we had just 50 of Lakewood's 850 full-time employees, 6% total, choose to participate in this program, they will collectively, based on an average of, let's say, a 15-minute commute time, and if half of those folks take the bus or public transportation and half ride their bikes, they'll save over $1,300 between them, those 50 folks, and they'll reduce our carbon emissions by more than 2,000 metric tons. So our hope is to learn a lot from doing this program, see what gets people motivated, how we can help them. We'll have special events during the month. We'll have meetups for bike rides. If any of you want to get involved, we'll put you to work and help you use public transportation and ride bikes around with our staff. And our hope is that, based on our experience, we'll be able to share this with the community. Imagine if the same percentage, just 6% of the 23,000 or so people that commute from Lakewood each day, 77% of which use single occupancy vehicles, meaning they're commuting by themselves, were to participate, then our numbers could skyrocket. We could be looking at 10,000 metric tons from that level of participation of carbon that we'd save from 4 days of making a different choice. So thank you very much for your support.
Thank you, Jonathan. Clerk, please read item 5 into the record.
Item 5, presentation, citizen commendations.
Chief Kevin Paletta.
Good evening, Mayor Murphy, members of City Council. Kevin Paletta, Lakewood Police Chief. I'm going to have quite a group coming up here, so if I could get the following people to come forward. Soda Lakes employees Brian Kakak, J.C. Pritchard, Liz Robotham, and Chuck Blood, along with Parks and Rec Supervisor Drew Sprafke. And if I could get Kay Ward to come forward, who will be representing her husband, Tom. We have several recipients of a Chief's Commendation for life-saving tonight. We're recognizing all of these individuals for that. So please feel free to come around. On Saturday, July 25th of this year, a gentleman had just finished his first set of water skiing lessons at the ski school when he suffered a massive heart attack. Immediately coming to his aid, Brian Kakak, J.C. Pritchard, found no apparent pulse or breathing, and both quickly began administering CPR. Ms. Liz Robotham called 911 when she saw the man collapse and provided critical medical and other information to the dispatcher and to the responding emergency personnel. Bear Creek Lake Park Ranger Supervisor Drew Sprafke overheard the call on his police radio and responded to the ski school with a portable defibrillator, which delivered a life-saving shock to the victim, Tom Ward. You four continued with life-saving efforts until emergency medical personnel arrived. Eventually, the victim regained a pulse and began breathing on his own again. As Mr. Ward was loaded into the ambulance, a paramedic commented that your life-saving efforts gave this victim his best chance for survival. 2 days later, the man was released from the hospital after receiving 2 stents and a pacemaker. Cardiac specialists commented that the patients who suffered this type of massive heart attack typically only have about a 3% survival rate. Mr. Kakik, Mr. Pritchard, Ms. Robotham, and Mr. Sprafke, your quick responses, selfless actions, compassion, and composure during an emergency situation saved the life of a heart attack victim, Mr. Tom Ward. In recognition of your actions, I am honored to present each of you with the Chief's Commendation for Life-Saving, and I thank you. And Mr. Ward's wife is here, the heart attack sufferer's wife, so she would like to say a few words before council. Okay?
Well, my husband just wanted me to thank everybody for saving his life. He was in the hospital 17 days.
Wow.
He ended up losing 17 pounds of muscle, and now he is 10 pounds heavier, doing good, cardiac rehab. But because of all these wonderful people, he wouldn't have survived. I'm nervous.
That's quite all right. Just
So everything just worked beautifully, like a well-oiled machine. And I thank everybody.
thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Chief. Thanks to everyone. What a marvelous, heartwarming story. Thank you. This is the point of the meeting where the public is invited to address City Council on items that do not appear on the agenda. And as always, I'll remind everyone there's a 3-minute time limit. When you come down to the podium, the light will be green for the first 2.5 minutes, and then it'll turn yellow. That'll tell you you have 30 seconds left, and when you hit red, I would ask you to wrap up your comments. Jim, did you want to talk about something later or a non-agenda item? No? Okay, Jim Otten.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Jim Otten, and I live at 1868 South Beach Street in Lakewood. I'm a retired USGS research geologist. During my tenure with the USGS, I was involved in several environmental studies of uranium, radium, radon, and the radioactivity associated with them, both naturally occurring and technologically enhanced. I was often brought in as the technical expert to assist a number of federal and state agencies in evaluating evidence for site contamination by radioactive materials such as uranium or radium. My comments here are my own. I do not represent the USGS or any other federal agency or state agency in the things I say here. I have read through the Phase 1 ESA document completed October 14th in regards to the proposed 59-acre site. I have some comments. Starting at page 16, there is a discussion of the background of each of the sub-areas discussed in the ESA and considered during that Phase 1 ESA. In the discussion of area IA06, the following is noted, and I quote, IA06 was used by a variety of agencies, including the GSA and the U.S. Geological Survey, or USGS, for laboratory analyses and equipment and materials storage. Hazardous materials, pesticides, nitrate film, explosives, and radionuclides were reportedly stored on site as well, unquote. Similar statements occur for 2 more areas in IA2N and IA17 on page 18. In spite of these brief notations of the presence or possible presence of radioactive materials or radioactive rocks in these three areas, there is no discussion of the nature of these radioactive materials or their significance, and no discussion of the potential for site contamination by radioactive materials later in the report. There is no indication that any site surveys for radioactivity were conducted in this ESA or as a result of this ESA activity or previous studies, nor any indication that any solid samples such as soils, landfill waste, or building materials were analyzed for radioactive materials such as uranium, thorium, or transuranic radionuclides. If such surveys and radioanalytical work were conducted in previous studies, published or unpublished, the results and a discussion of the results should have been included in the Phase 1 ESA. The ESA also reports and briefly discusses a 2007 groundwater survey across the Denver Federal Center in which analyses for uranium up to 52 micrograms per liter were observed. The text notes speculation that these elevated values were due to leaching of natural soils. Reference to other studies of uranium concentrations in groundwater in the Denver metro area could have been used to confirm this speculation. Otherwise, one could also speculate that uranium was derived from released materials on the Denver Federal Center. I urge that the City Council seek additional information on this topic before moving forward with the decision to acquire the site. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Thank you. Carol Baum.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council. I just have some concerns about the new, the federal center, that plan that was discussed last Monday. Some of the concerns, that Jim just mentioned are, I feel that there needs to be a more thorough investigation to identify potential hazardous materials that might be buried on the site. And, the expense associated with that, I don't know who would pay for that. Also, since the final proposal was submitted a week ago, I'm concerned that the public hasn't been informed well enough on what the final plan is, first of all, and I feel like more time needs to be taken so that the people know what is happening in the city. And the city does need input from the citizens, and not just a few. I think it seems like there's a minority that, not the majority of the citizens know what's going on, just a little fraction of the, all the people that are in the city. And I feel that more time needs to be taken. We shouldn't just rush through with this because it is a big, expensive project that you're undertaking. And I'm just wondering why the rush to finalize this before the election. And I'm concerned also about the huge amount of money from the city's reserves that will be spent to make these changes. What happens if there's an emergency arises? Where will this money come from to deal with these kinds of issues if our reserves are too low? Also, with more the high-rise buildings, it does change the landscape of Lakewood, and where we could see the view before, now these high-rise buildings, the view and potentially other problems can arise with the more congestion in the city. I feel that that will be a problem, and because of an increase of more people in the city, we'll need more police. There could be more crime because of more people, and there are lots of other issues like those that we need to figure in the cost of those, things. And that's mainly what I am concerned about. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Baum. Anyone else in chambers wish to comment on any non-agenda item?
Good evening, City Council. Glad to be here. Glad you're here. Appreciate your clarifying comments last Monday. Thank you so much. I just have concerns about the development of the 59 acres. I don't feel like the council's done a very good job of selling it. I'm a family and consumer studies person, and I don't think buying contaminated land is a good idea. And I don't understand why we would even do that. So I would suggest that either you need to convince us why that's so important. I would hate to see the city left holding the bag and have liability in lawsuits because of, as it sounds like, there wasn't adequate studies with radioactivity in the area. Has there been a drive-by by the city council to the area to observe it? I know Mr. Roybal suggested
It just
that the
came
last
from
meeting.
there.
Great, great. So will the study be further researched?
Are you finished?
Yes,
right,
I think
thank
you
you.
should not do this.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks, Tamara. Anyone else? All right. With that, we'll close public comment. Let me talk just a little bit about the federal center. Ms. Baum talked about the vast amounts that could potentially come from the city reserves, and just to clarify that, our reserves ended last year at about $39 million, and the preliminary financial model has us using somewhere between 8 and 9 million of that $39 million. So they're at our highest point in our history right now, and we will always, as this council has always done, and particularly building up these reserves over these last 10 years, have plenty on hand to plan for any potential emergencies. In terms of the environmental studies, Jim, as I mentioned briefly to Tamara, we just came from, I wouldn't call it a tour. I think 6 of us were over there with some folks from GSA, including the gentleman that's been doing a lot of the remediation out there. And he reiterated the fact that, as we discussed extensively at the last meeting, the 44 acres, 43 and change acres that makes up the most of the land is classified as no further action, and you can build anything you want right now, including residential. It has been cleaned up, and has been cleaned up to a very high standard. The remaining 15 to 16 acres was a landfill. That's solid waste, not hazardous waste. Part of that landfill had a very active use for many years. It's a parking lot for RTD Park and Ride, and the cleanup over there is very, very manageable. It's done daily throughout this country. So I recognize the concerns, and I understand them, and believe me, council will continue its due diligence, including on the environmental side. I'll go to Councilor Paul, and I'll talk about some comment opportunities that are currently existing and then going forward as well.
Thank you. I would just add that the city does have a website, a web page up right now that you can go to. There's a section for comments for folks that are interested. And I did see that our PIO put that out on Nextdoor as well. And ironically, I think there was some criticism that we put it out too broadly. Some folks weren't even interested in hearing about it because they felt that they weren't close enough to that. But it is citywide, and it should be citywide. So we want to hear from folks throughout the community about their thoughts, questions, concerns about that site.
Shakti?
I just wanted to add that one of the things that we learned about today was how much more intensive the research of this land has been than the research would be if it was industrial land that wasn't owned by the federal government, or than happened for the St. Anthony land. So it really has been investigated a lot.
And in terms of public comment opportunities, we're going to have a special meeting on October 5th to look at our second public hearing on our budget approval process, second and final public hearing. So that will also be an opportunity for public comment on the federal center or anything else that's on your minds. And then we're going to try to put together the night of October 12th, as things move forward, would be the first reading on the particulars that would go into this project. So while public comment would not be available that evening, we're going to try to do an open house out here in the atrium area from, say, 5:30 to 7. And invite folks to come in. You can look at boards. You can talk to experts. We will not be there trying to, as Tamara said, sell the project. You'll be talking to folks who've been working on this for many, many years, including the environmental folks. So, again, October 12th from 5:30 to 7. Try to give you a couple weeks' notice on that. Jay, try to give you a couple weeks' notice on it as well. Try to get Mr. Walker here and some other people, Tim Horn, whoever can come. Recognize there's a lot of questions and concerns. We want to give you as much opportunity as we can to hear from you. All right. That moves us on to the consent agenda. The use of the consent agenda has been made to expedite council action. It contains both resolutions and first reading ordinances, as it does tonight. Resolutions are items of a fairly routine nature. Some of those tonight are a little more detailed, and the public will have an opportunity to comment on the resolutions in the consent agenda in a moment here. First reading ordinances appear on the agenda only for the purpose of setting future public hearing dates and ordering the newspaper publication of the proposed ordinance. So therefore, we won't have public comment on the first reading ordinance that's on the consent agenda tonight. And any council member may request an item on the consent agenda be removed for separate discussion and action under general business. Will the clerk please read the items on the consent agenda into the record?
The consent agenda consists of items 7 through 13 inclusive. Item 7, Resolution 2015-48, approving the West Colfax Vision 2040 Action Plan. Item 8, Resolution 2015-49, endorsing West Metro Fire Protection District Seal of Approval Program. Item 9, Resolution 2015-50, approving the 2016 operating plan and proposed budget for the Lakewood West Colfax Business Improvement District. Item 10, Resolution 2015-51, appointing Andrew Wong to the Board of Directors of the Alameda Corridor Business Improvement District. Item 11, Resolution 2015-52, approving the 2016 operating plan and proposed budget for the Alameda Corridor Business Improvement District. Item 12, Ordinance 2015-16, repealing Chapter 5.46 of the Lakewood Municipal Code regarding amusement devices and amusement arcades. And item 13, accepting the minutes of the Advisory Commission for an Inclusive Communities Full Commission meeting of August 19th, 2015.
Thank you. We will have a presentation on one of the items tonight, and that is item 7, and I would invite those folks to start making their way down to the podium. I believe that's Bill Marino, and Councillor Barraway is going to change roles, and Roger Wadnell, and Kevin Yoshida. And while they are gathering, I would just remind council and the public that in terms of the other items on the agenda, if there are any questions, I know there's someone here from West Metro Fire Protection District regarding their seal of approval program, where we won't have any presentation there. We had one a couple of weeks back. He's here to answer questions. And also Ken Parks is here from the Alameda Gateway Community Association, if anybody has any questions on that.
Are you ready?
Yes, I'm ready. Sorry.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor and City Council. I'm Roger Wadnell, Comprehensive Planning Manager for the city. And tonight we are here to bring forward the Colfax Vision 2040 Action Plan. And what this is essentially a continuation of the 2006 Colfax Action Plan that was adopted, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But this plan was result of over a year's work with a large stakeholder group, the Colfax Vision Group, and the plan was written by the Colfax Vision Group with support from city planning, economic development, and engineering staff. And the plan, again, was written by the stakeholder committee and chaired by Councilor Cindy Barraway, and then co-chaired by Kevin Yoshida with the ABO Group, and Bill Marino with 40 West and 40 West Arts District and the Colfax Business Improvement District. And generally, the plan encompasses Colfax Avenue from Sheridan to Quail Street, and it also includes connections to light rail. But I think what's significant, and this plan also was adopted by Planning Commission, and our action requested tonight is for City Council to approve the plan by resolution. But I'd like to speak a little bit to introduce the topic, and then we'll have members of the committee also speak briefly to give you a little bit of background. But what a point I'd really like to make is, if you all can remember back to January 2006 when the West Colfax Action Plan was adopted, this plan is actually chaired by then Councilor Murphy. And really looking back, a remarkable amount of implementation has occurred. I mean, before that plan was adopted, there was not a business improvement district. There wasn't the 40 West Arts District, which is very active. There was a huge amount of city and public investment, sidewalks, public art, infrastructure improvements, a lot of private investment, and then the city actually adopted mixed-use zoning for the district as well. So really what this plan is a continuation. It's bringing the action plan up and bringing it forward 10, 15, 20 years into the future. I won't get into a lot of detail about the content of the plan. The next speakers will talk a little bit more. But really, the plan is an action plan. It has goals and action steps related to infrastructure, transportation, marketing and promotion, placemaking, physical improvements. So it is a plan that really is going to be used by the city and by the community, especially the Business Improvement District and in the business community as well. So it really sets out a blueprint for the future for West Colfax as well as for the West Rail Line corridor as well. Another implementation step that is happening right now is the Embrace the Facts campaign, where the city is actively promoting the West Corridor and the Colfax Corridor to the business community for the appropriate type of development. So the city is taking a very active role, and this plan is really to just bring things forward so that we have a blueprint for the future. And what I'd like to do before I turn it over to the committee is just kind of walk through one example of the action steps, just to kind of so you can see how it's structured. And this is under the topic infrastructure. A goal more general is to enhance placemaking through infrastructure investments, to make infrastructure really work for the corridor. That's the goal. For example, an action step is to activate drainage and detention areas and enhance those areas as areas that are placemaking, which create an identity and can be used by the community. So an example of that is outside of the district in Belmar. This is a large detention area that has a pedestrian walk around it, pedestrian facilities. These are the type of enhancements that the plan will identify when infrastructure improvements go in, so that these improvements are more usable for the community and more of an enhancement to the corridor. And then the second example is on Colfax, Dry Gulch improvements. It's in front of the Walmart site, where you have a pedestrian path, you have landscaping, you have real aesthetic treatment of what could be a real pedestrian type of development. It could be real utilitarian, but the idea is to make it function for the community. So that's kind of an overview, and with that, I'd like to turn this over to Councilor Barroway to talk a little bit more about process and the content of the plan.
Thanks, Roger. Mayor, council members, Cindy Barroway. The January, and we made ourselves notes, so we try to stick as close as we can to the timing here. The January 2016 West Colfax Avenue Action Plan set the community on a path of revitalization. One of the statements in that 2006 executive summary noted that the overriding theme was a belief that Colfax Avenue is more than just a road. The belief has become even stronger today due to several factors, including the Colfax mixed-use zoning in 2008, which allowed for the first time ever for residential use on Colfax Avenue, the completion of the W light rail line, and the formation of our first arts district. As you'll see in the document that you've got on your online there, we view Lakewood's West Colfax as a community, and it was this community that drove this 2040 vision plan process. It was shepherded by the West Colfax Community Association Board of Directors. We met over the course of the past 15 months to update the 2006 vision. The larger committee met about a dozen times, and the various subcommittees met frequently, involving even more interested parties. We engaged the community in as many ways as possible. Now, on the screen in front of you, you can see the various light rail lines, including the 14 stops along the W, and our current zoning is below that. This was included in the citywide 3-year zoning process and approved in 2013. These are two key ingredients in the revitalization of West Colfax. The zoning in the west line has spurred great interest in our corridor, and we're beginning to see more and more development along the way. One of the first was at Colfax and Garrison with the Weston Solutions. In April 2016, when the light rail to DIA is completed, Lakewood will be connected to the world. Think about that. We have Terumo BCT right here in our backyard. They're an international player, and they're going to be connected to their hometown back in Japan. That's going to give us a lot of global exposure that we didn't have before. This next slide I really like a lot. Look at all that color. Color is not necessarily something people normally think about when they think about West Colfax. RTD and the City of Lakewood partnered to ensure that we had public art along the light rail line, including the wraps on what would have otherwise been just metal boxes. I've heard many, I'm sure you have too, positive comments about the various pieces of art, including the sculptures, and Rogers is the walking boat underneath about where the mayor's at in that 40 West photo there. In addition to RTD in the city, Rocky Mount College of Art and Design, WCCA, 40 West Arts, and the West Colfax Business Improvement District continue to collaborate on ways to improve the corridor. One of the efforts has been Colorfax, an idea to have murals throughout the corridor. So we currently have 10 murals along the corridor, and 7 of those murals were recently completed at the first annual Colfax Mural Fest, which we hope to become the event to see in Lakewood from year to year. We want to make West Colfax a destination and not just a thoroughfare. And we believe by having these murals here, more and more people are going to come visit our community. We are here as the voice of all those citizens who've been involved for many years, and beginning with the 2006 action plan to those who are involved in the document you have before you tonight. This has been a collaborative project that continues to look for opportunities for West Colfax to sparkle, and that's out of the 2006 document, and that's a homage to Nina Rockley with Rockley Music. West Colfax is a community where people stop to see art at RimCAD or Lakewood Arts Council, catch a show at the Edge Theater, dine at Casa Bonita, or Chicago-style hot dogs. With this plan, we envision even more people discovering and enjoying our eclectic community. It's been my pleasure to work with all the citizens in the various plans, and my honor to be involved with the 2040 Vision Action Plan. And allow me now to turn this over to one of our key team members, Kevin Yoshida, who'll provide more insight into the document before you. Kevin?
Thank you, Councilor Barroway. I wanted to pull back the curtain a little bit and describe a little bit more of our process to you. Roger Widenell described our study area, but one of the reasons that was important to us was to think about where the light rail, those half-mile radius points that we've all learned to appreciate and understand how to build off of, where that ran parallel to and between Oak and Sheridan, and what that meant, maybe even more importantly, is how other modalities meant on that 3 3/4 mile stretch, how different it was to think about that one-way walk being 75 minutes, or how it buzzes by in 7.5 minutes. So we really tried to embrace all the different ways that we want people to experience West Colfax and think about those as we were developing the plan. Another aspect that was foundational, I'm an architect and urban designer and work a lot in the public realm, and making economic development, architecture, urban design, urban planning accessible was important. So we found this analogy. It's a blast from the past. If you remember your Psych 101 class, maybe, this is Abraham Maslow, and it was an idea about personal human psychology and how individuals were meant to try to ascend this, address their basic needs first, engage their community, engage their family at the middle level, and then become at the top of that pyramid, whatever the being that you were meant to be on this earth, and participate at even a larger level, what that meant. Well, we found that was a valuable way of talking about our community as well, and that analogy could be drawn very directly. And the words we used for those three segments of the pyramid were, what does it mean for our city to be viable, to address the basic needs, this body deals with all the time, and how that platform can then create the platform to become viable. And what lies at the top of that pyramid, just like an individual being, that what a community is after is really emotional connectedness with all of its members and all of its citizens, and that's what Memorable is. And that's what we're hoping and striving for on West Colfax. I'm going to let Bill Marino describe these 5 areas that we talked about, but wanted to just, at the top of this section, what does it mean to ascend that pyramid for a community or Lakewood or Lakewood West Colfax? Well, we're hoping that this document provides the foundation for finding our authenticity, be so cool, so unique, to reflect the citizens, the businesses on that corridor so well that we are one of a kind, and everybody comes and flocks to us because what we have is so valuable culturally. So, Mr. Marino.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Council. You know, I always cherish these moments we get to share together.
As do we, Bill.
I'm sure you do. But thank you. I wanted all 12 minutes, but they only gave me 3.5, so I'm gonna try to be brief. You know, I've stood here before and I've asked you to imagine. And some of the earlier speakers talked about the prior West Colfax Action Plan, where we could only imagine the things that we talked about. And I was on that committee. And to see where we've come from 2006 to 2015, and to only imagine where we could go from here. So cultural identity, there's no shortage of cultural identity in West Colfax. We all know the storied history of West Colfax. It was the gateway to the Rockies and still is in many ways. It's an entrepreneurial hub. And all those multi-generational businesses, the Margottis, the DePaulos, the Veldkamps, the Bittmans, all of these folks that have invested their lives and their families in our community along West Colfax. It has its unique grit and glitter that's only West Colfax. Imagine a continuation of the energy and momentum of the past few years. More progress on revitalizing the existing business community as we usher in new investment, new residents, new businesses, more visitors, more arts and entertainment venues, more experiences, all with their own twist on creating an authentic West Colfax experience. I have infrastructure and connectivity here together. Imagine more progress toward economic vibrancy as we work together to address the infrastructural needs of the corridor, specifically the floodplain issues, something that I know that we've all talked about together. Imagine improvements that will bolster redevelopment and attract new investment. And consider that possibility within the context of further progress on connectivity. Councilor Byron already mentioned it. Building on the progress that we've already made and leveraging what's ahead in 2016, when there'll be a light rail connection at all of our stations to DIA, which connects our corridor and our city to the world. Something we've been working very, very hard on is placemaking, and you're going to start seeing more fruits of that labor. You've seen the box wraps, but we have additional plans rolling out. Imagine the plans we've put in place together that augment the aesthetic of West Colfax. ushering in new improvements in gateway, signage, wayfinding, and pedestrian amenities, all with a respectful eye to our heritage and infused with a new and collaborative energy for the 21st century. Speaking of energy and vibrancy, it'd be tough for anyone to argue that the economic vitality of West Colfax wasn't on a positive trajectory. Economic vibrancy is about choices, employment choices, housing choices, choices for amenities and entertainment. Today, there are more choices on West Colfax than there's been in decades, but there's really still so much to do. Whoops, I'm ahead of myself. As we work together to continue the Renaissance, our focus is to stay true to the historic corridor's roots as we plan for the future and package West Colfax to once again welcome the world. This presents West Colfax with a unique opportunity to look at its past to shape its future, to tap into its colorful history, and to harness the extraordinary passion for this storied avenue. The overarching goal of this plan is to shape West Colfax into a place where locals and visitors alike can come to create fresh opportunities and connect with diverse experiences and celebrate culture both old and new. Practically speaking, what's this document all about? How will we use it? This document captures key goals and action steps, principles that support our emerging Renaissance. It's a touchstone for community leaders and policymakers and a guideline for West Colfax advocates. It's much like the prior West Colfax Action Plan, but just looks farther into the future. It's a reference for all of us who are working to re-energize West Colfax. We also want the vision of this document to inspire others. We want it to inspire new residents, new investors, and the next wave of entrepreneurs. In short, our goal is to leverage the nostalgia of the past, the energy of the present, and package it for the future. And a lot of folks ask, how are we going to do that? We're going to do it the only way we know how, by collaborating, by partnering with people, other organizations, with a sustained and well-integrated efforts with the City of Lakewood and the West Colfax-based organizations and a very active business community. We can tell the West Colfax story, a story about a community re-emerging to celebrate the glory of the past and the glitter of the future still to come. In closing, I've been asked to remind you this is a resolution and that the staff's recommendation is for council to approve it. We hope you'll do that. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Bill. I just got to say, great job, everyone. First of all, a great choice of Maddie Nichols as your cover girl on the last slide. I'm sure that she deserves it, and I'm sure she appreciates it very much. I go to your meetings virtually every month, and I often start out my humble little portion of my update portion of it by saying that I come to the meetings to learn what's going on in Colfax. I'm continually inspired by the progress that you make month in and month out. And tonight, is evidence for everybody to see of the incredible imagination that's going on. So thank you all that worked so hard on this plan. Other comments on this? Let's do comments from council just on this presentation. Then I'll open up public comment on the entire consent agenda. On this presentation, Councillor Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. I grew up one block south of Colfax and watched as it deteriorated. I am just so disappointed that my sweet paw isn't alive to see what you're doing. I am in awe with the motivation, the enthusiasm, the excitement. In all honesty, it's contagious. God bless you for what you're doing, and I thank you. It's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Paul.
Thank you. Yeah, I would echo that. Great job. I love the term grit and glitter. Definitely West Colfax. So you've come in with a dream and you're keeping that dream alive, but you have bigger dreams and we support that. so much energy. For the folks who are tuned in or haven't been to a West Colfax meeting, come check it out. It's a lot of fun, a lot of great things going on. So very, very nicely done.
All right, I will now open up the public comment portion of the consent agenda. Is there anyone in chambers who would wish to comment on any item on the consent agenda that the city clerk read into the record 12 and a half minutes ago? Or thereabouts. All right, we'll close public comment on the consent agenda. I'm ready for a motion.
Mayor Murphy, I move for the approval of the council minutes for the acceptance of the minutes of the boards and commissions. Order all ordinances introduced on the first reading to be published in the Denver Post, with public hearings set for the date included in the ordinance, and for the adoption of resolutions, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
All right, before we vote, I just want to call out a couple of the items on the consent agenda. I mentioned that Ken Parks is here representing Alameda Gateway, Alameda Corridor Business Improvement District, and there's 3 items relating to that, one of which is the appointment of a new member of the board, and that is Andrew Wong. I'm not sure if Mr. Wong is here tonight, but Mr. Wong is with Starwood Properties. And Starwood is, if you've been reading the Denver Business Journal, the Denver Post, or watching Channel 9 over the last few days, Starwood just purchased Belmar from GF Properties. So largest, one of the largest real estate transactions in the Denver metro region. So we're thrilled to have a new partner on board for our downtown Belmar. So welcome, Andrew, to the board. All right, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your votes on the consent agenda. And it passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you for your hard work. Will the clerk please read item 14 into the record?
Item 14, Ordinance O 2015-15, an ordinance amending Section 9.43.020 of the Lakewood Municipal Code and adding a new Section 9.43.085 to the Lakewood Municipal Code pertaining to prohibitions regarding marijuana cultivation for medicinal or recreational use in the city of Lakewood.
And here with us is our city attorney, Tim Cox, who gave us a thorough presentation at a study session a few weeks back, and he's going to do much of that again. Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. Good evening. This will look and sound a lot like what we talked about the last time. We do have the addition of a short PowerPoint presentation by our Deputy City Attorney, Police Legal Advisor Janet Young. She'll be talking about the second of our 2 ordinances. You know, I would note that we've got number 15 first and number 14 second. That's we just thought you'd want to spend perhaps most of your time on the cultivation ordinance that I'm going to discuss. And yes, it will look a lot like that last presentation because not much has changed. You gave us direction to go forward and bring this back for action without many substantive changes. But of course, this was presented as a staff recommendation of a fairly moderate approach to the issue. And there's room, has been room all along for your input, and we welcome that as well tonight, and of course your questions as well. So this is regarding Ordinance 2015-15, and this would make one amendment to the definitions in an existing section concerning marijuana, and add a new section on the cultivation in residential neighborhoods. We'll do what we always do and go back to the future with the 2 state enactments that really frame this whole discussion about marijuana, dating back to November 2000. And it may seem like it's been that long since we started talking about it, but really it was 2009 when it came to the cities and towns and counties across the state to deal with the issue of medical marijuana. It was the voters in 2000, the November election, that adopted Amendment 20 to the Colorado Constitution that created an affirmative defense for possession of marijuana if you were a person who was using it per a doctor's recommendation for a debilitating medical condition. Not much happened, you may recall, until about 2009 when the administration, the Department of Justice, announced they would not be prosecuting marijuana offenses in states with comprehensive medical marijuana programs. Ours was among the first, but not the first. And when that happened, that's when we started to hear from people wanting to set up businesses in the community surrounding medical marijuana. So November 2000 was the medical marijuana election, and 2009, 2010 is when it started to feel its impact around here. Then we fast forward to November 2012 with another November election, another constitutional amendment. This one was Amendment 64, and this one has the two parts that we've dealt with sort of separately. There's the business side of it that allowed for the various categories of what we call recreational or retail marijuana businesses, the retail sales, the manufacturing, the cultivation, and the testing labs. And those all became legal, subject to local government action on whether to opt out of any or all of those categories. And the council, of course, has taken action on that. The other half of Amendment 64 concerns the personal use and possession. And for the first time in Colorado, it became legal for a person to possess and use a small amount of marijuana for non-medical reasons or purposes. And that's really what we're dealing with tonight. We have dealt with, as we said, the commercial side of the Amendment 64 equation. And now we're dealing with those folks, like all of us, who have the ability to grow marijuana in our own homes. And for the first several years that we dealt with marijuana issues, we were not hearing much about cultivation issues. We were not getting complaints about odors or other activity related to marijuana in residential settings. In the last couple of years, that's changed a little bit, and that's what's prompted this action to address the cultivation in the residential settings. So to review, Lakewood has adopted medical marijuana ordinances and prohibiting recreational businesses, but this is our first attempt at adopting restrictions on cultivating, producing, processing, and maintaining marijuana in residential neighborhoods. And as I said, there have been not a large number. I think the chief determined after our last meeting it was about 30 complaints from various neighborhoods around the city concerning activities surrounding marijuana grows. And let me emphasize that we're not talking about what should be commercial grow operations. Again, cultivation operations for a commercial business are prohibited in the city, but you are allowed to maintain a small amount within your homes, or we'll determine what that amount is, but you're allowed to maintain marijuana in your homes. And sometimes those look like commercial operations. Those are the ones that we frequently get the complaints about. We did talk just a couple of weeks back in a study session where the major points were for us to review the options available for regulation, recommend what we consider to be a moderate, middle-of-the-road approach, and then ask for council's direction to proceed, which you did give us. These are the areas essentially that we were looking at, the places where we believe there's the ability of local government to place some limitations on the activity so as to mitigate the impacts of that activity. Again, there are things we cannot prevent because the state constitution says they are lawful, and possession of marijuana is one of those. But we have to decide, must that be indoors or can it be outdoors? Attached to the primary residence or a detached structure? What about accessibility to minors? What does the state say about that? What do we need to say about that? And can it be the primary use of a property, or must it be secondary to some other primary use? So location, all of those have to do with location on a property. Then the number of plants, the amount of marijuana one can maintain. And finally, what we think is an important provision, should we have a right to inspect properties when we have reason to believe that there is something that is out of order concerning the marijuana grow there. So what follows in the next few slides is really a summary, very similar to what you saw before, of what's in the ordinance that has been presented to you. And on the subject of location, those first few bullet points that we looked at in the last slide our proposal is that marijuana may be cultivated, produced, processed, and maintained in residential neighborhoods only at the responsible person's primary residence or a garage attached to that primary residence. We have a definition for primary residence that is borrowed from election law. It's sometimes not that clear where one's primary residence is, but that is the objective, is that it be your home that you're growing at, not some other use. On the question of indoors, outdoors, attached or detached, the consensus as we did our research and came forward with this proposal was that the closer to the main part of the property you are, the less likelihood there is for crime and impacts on neighbors. So we're proposing that a detached garage would not be an acceptable location, or a shed or other outbuilding, but that it be inside the primary residence or inside an attached garage. We think it's in the interest of the owners of the property, the occupants of the property, to have close tabs on the activity as well anyway. And as you see at the bottom of the screen, we would strictly prohibit anything outdoors or in any detached structure, with an asterisk that was brought up at the study session, a good point, that we have an allowance now in our zoning code for accessory dwelling units that can be attached or detached, and with certain limitations. So if you have a secondary structure, a secondary building on a property, and it is used as an accessory dwelling unit, and it serves as somebody's primary residence, whether it's an in-law suite or some other use, if it's the primary residence of the person living there, then they have the right under the law to maintain marijuana there as well. And we would just, that's the exception to the no detached structure rule, but it is the same treatment. They would have the same restrictions in place in their primary residence. Then to the number of plants, and this is one of the ones that we spent a lot of time on, looking at what other jurisdictions have done. We've told you there are cities and towns that have higher maximums than this, and cities, including Boulder, that have a lower number. Keeping in mind that a lot of the state regulations over the past several years have referred to the number of 6 plants per person, dating back to the medical marijuana provisions. We are proposing that an individual in his or her primary residence may maintain no more than 6 plants, and it's 6 plants per person. However, for, again, controlling the potential negative impacts on surrounding properties, we're proposing that no matter how many people are eligible within that primary residence to use and possess marijuana, we're recommending a maximum of 12 plants in the primary residence. Any more than that, and it really does start to have a greater potential for impact on surrounding properties. So 6 per person, but a maximum of 12. Further restrictions on location. Per state law, this is a language that comes from state law. The terms are enclosed and locked space. The cultivation area within the house must be in an enclosed, locked space, inaccessible to anyone under 21. Again, state law provides that. We will talk in a minute about a sort of exception to that. This ordinance that we bring to you tonight, we did talk the last time about, in addition to the limit on the number of plants, we talked about a square footage restriction and even a height limitation, sort of a cubic footage approach. And in further discussions and further research, I think it comes down to simplicity and enforceability. It's a much easier thing to measure a number of plants than it is to figure out how much space it's occupying vertically, horizontally, and so on. So we do not have in this draft a square footage or height limitation, and I call it a draft. It is an ordinance that's ready for your action if you agree. But I wanted to make sure we pointed that change out. Additional restrictions would include really things that shouldn't happen anyway, but we wanted to call them out particular to this activity. There should be no light pollution, glare, or brightness that disturbs others of ordinary visual sensitivity. You've heard that this activity can sometimes require high wattage lights, and a lot of them. And so I want to make sure that that activity does not affect anyone off the property. It goes without saying that the activity has to comply with all applicable building codes, fire codes, electrical, and mechanical, and so on. We will talk in a minute about the role of the building code in this activity. And of course, like everything else that happens in the city, the activity should comply with all applicable zoning codes, including setback and height requirements. And naturally, if the building that the activity is in conforms, then the activity should as well. The subject of odor complaints, and I know I'm certain we'll get into that a little bit as we discuss this issue, but I did want to call it out proactively. We did not have in the draft that was brought to you at the study session a provision for odor, and generally those look like what's referenced up there for Aurora and Arvada. They have provisions that say something along the lines of that the cultivation and processing of marijuana plants must not be perceptible from outside, whether visible or olfactory or whatever the sense might be. It's to be an indoor activity that no one would know about from outside. We did talk about it at the study session. The reason that the primary reason we did not include that in our proposed ordinance and our recommended ordinance is because of enforceability. Quite frankly, plants give off an odor. Some more than others, different times, more than other times. 6 plants give off an odor, 3 plants give off an odor, 12 plants give off an odor. And there are a lot of contributing factors to that: location and wind direction and open windows and closed windows and ventilation systems and so on. Sensitivity of a person making a complaint. And in talking extensively with our police professionals and our police legal advisor, there are great concerns about what the police can do with an odor complaint. If they get a call, please come out here, I want to talk to you about a strong marijuana odor that I'm detecting from my property. Okay, we have to figure out where that's coming from. We have to acknowledge that it's in and of itself a legal activity that you're sensing. We have to have the police agent go to the door and talk to whoever's involved, and that person, absent a warrant, does not need to let the agent look around and see what's going on inside the property. So the agent may not have any opportunity to know whether there are 6 plants or 12 or 19 or any other number. The fact that someone called and complained probably is not considered probable cause to obtain a warrant from a court. And we did talk at the last session about what that means. And we'll, in just a moment, we'll talk about the standard for issuance of a search warrant. Basically, it comes down to, can a police agent tell the difference between a compliant residence and a non-compliant residence, even if he or she is standing on the same spot as the complaining party and says, yeah, I smell it, and it seems to be coming from that direction. How can that information lead to action towards enforcement? If the person decides to let the agent in, they may just find there are 5 plants there, but on that day they're more noticeable than on prior days. So we have concerns about enforceability. We don't like to propose laws that can't be effectively enforced. There are, as we said, odor provisions in other jurisdictions. The Aurora Arvada approach is that it not be perceptible off-site. Thornton has probably the most aggressive approach that we have seen, because that city actually requires anyone who wants to grow marijuana in their homes to install a proper ventilation and filtration system. We have concerns about the viability of that approach. We have, to the extent we have medical marijuana businesses who get licensed, one of the conditions of their license is that they control the odors within their commercial operation. But to require a homeowner to engage in a lawful activity and require them to spend the money on a system that may or may not effectively keep the odors on site, that seemed a risky proposition. Now, we have heard from Aurora that they are getting search warrants. They're able to get the court to issue warrants based on the information presented to the police, and they're going on site and they're investigating what's going on the property. You certainly have the opportunity to talk to Chief Paletta about his concerns on that. I would summarize by saying that we're not really sure how Aurora is able to get the warrants under those circumstances. And I guess this would be as good a time as any to talk about what we have to show in order to get a warrant. That is a fair probability that contraband or evidence of a crime is located in a particular location. That's not a terribly high standard. We're not talking about beyond a reasonable doubt. A fair probability, I don't know if that's 50%, 70%, 39%. I think it has to be more than 50, but it's not a terribly high standard. And yet, you have to be able to show that in order to get a warrant. And the fact that an individual complained about the smell next door, we're not sure that gets you there. But and in other cities, we're apparently seeing voluntary compliance, where people are simply letting the agents in, not knowing perhaps whether they have to or not, or deciding that they think they're in compliance and just want to let the agent take a look around. So there's what's not in your ordinance that we wanted to spend some time on, and again, we'll be able to discuss that a little bit further before we're done. Just a couple of other slides here on sort of miscellaneous provisions. The affirmative defense, remember that we're requiring per state law that the area of cultivation be inaccessible to anyone under 21. I called it sort of an exception because it's really the affirmative defense that if there is a person under 21 who is a sort of card-carrying medical marijuana patient per a doctor's recommendation, that person obviously has to have the right to access the marijuana. So that would be the narrow exception or defense available under the circumstances. And then the right of entry. And this is not the same thing we were just talking about with the police. This is for our sort of code inspectors, the people who check out for compliance with our codes. We're not talking about sending people in to make sure that they're in compliance with this ordinance. It's, are there electrical concerns? Are there water concerns, the plumbing concerns? Are there factors, modifications made in the property without the appropriate code compliance? And if there's reason to believe that that's the case, we need to have the ability for those folks to get into the property. In a nutshell, the three circumstances, as we talked about at the last session, that would allow for a city inspector to get into the property. First is with consent of the owner or a person in control of the property. Second, if that consent is not given, would be a warrant if one is available, an administrative warrant from the city. And the third would be an emergency, an imminent risk to life, health, or safety. Would be the circumstance that they'd be able to get into as well. And we talked a little bit about a real-life example of an emergency that happened here in the city, and it's lucky that it was caught when it was. So that's the ordinance in a nutshell. To summarize, our position is that we cannot prohibit the residential grows. People are allowed to have this product in their homes and to use it. But the city should have the right to adopt reasonable limitations to mitigate the negative impacts of that activity. And we think these regulations would strike a balance between the rights secured by the constitutional amendments and everyone's right to the quiet enjoyment of their individual properties.
Thanks.
With that, we're happy to take any questions.
Is Janet going to talk on this one or the next one?
Janet's available to the extent we need her on this one. She's here to do the presentation on the changes to Title IX, right, which is the next ordinance.
That's what I thought. Okay, thank you. I will now open the public comment on this item, and we have, I think, 3 names have indicated a desire to speak. First is Gerald Espinoza.
Good evening. My name is Gerald Espinoza. Pretty much been in Lakewood for 40 years. Six months old when my parents bought a house on J Street. Sorry, I bought my house on Gray Street at 23. I am one person that has complained about my neighbors growing marijuana in their backyard. 2013, 20 plants that were 8 feet tall were growing to my property line, outside, not enclosed. It was reported. It was simply stated that Lakewood forgot to put it in the ordinance that they cannot grow it outside. Okay. Drug Task Force had then either talked to the people living there. They have since enclosed it in a greenhouse. The greenhouse has now broken windows, and the 20 marijuana plants are growing outside of the greenhouse. So I definitely agree with some of the ordinance going in as far as being attached, being enclosed, and and the number. I would like to see the council not omit certain things that other cities have put in play. We should take their advice on odor, and other things like that. On my block, I have about 7 kids ranging from 5 to 13. They smell it in my front yard. They are now able to distinguish what that odor is. So I would definitely like to see things not omitted from other cities' ordinances. Okay.
Thank you. Councilor, I'm sorry, public comment. David Wolf and Jan Wolf.
Hello, my name's David Wolf. I live at 10375 West Idaho Place. I've lived there for about a little over 19 years. I've never had any problems in the neighborhood. Been a great place to live. Love Lakewood. Unfortunately, I'm just my bad luck or whatever, but this last December, a medical marijuana grower moved in next door. Supposedly 3 growers are growing up to 99 plants in the house. The stench is unbearable. It's 2 weeks out of every other month is bad. Can't use our backyard. Can't go walk to get the paper in the front yard, and your eyes water just going to get the paper. It's that bad. I've had to install a new air conditioning system in my house. Can't run my swamp cooler anymore because it brings in the stink into the house. I put a new garage door on. I'm thinking about putting new windows to try to keep it out of my house. It's that bad. Spent over $7,000, around $8,000 so far, and looking at another $10,000 for windows. I believe I'd probably spend a hell of a lot more than, I'm sorry about that, a lot more than what the grower has spent on any kind of filtration system on his house. Smells like a family of skunks that are living in your neighborhood or in your house. That's an analogy of what it's like. I have complained to the city and the code. There's code for odors for minor businesses. There's code for medical marijuana businesses. I believe it ought to be the same as a medical marijuana business. The stench shouldn't be able to leave your property. You should have a right to have clean air and not have to put up with what another property owner emits, the stench he emits that interrupts your life. Who knows what my value of my property is? I don't know if I could even sell it. Surely at a reduced price if I had to, if other people knew that the grower next door was there. Doing an internet search, I just tried to get some basic information on marijuana that I'm not privy to. I typed in, what's the smell from one plant? And for a medical marijuana, a sour diesel plant, they said you could smell it from over one plant over a block away. So there is potential for medical marijuana plants to stink up whole neighborhoods like they have ours. Other
Could you
searches?
please wrap up your comments, sir? Your 3 minutes are up.
Sorry.
Or your wife can continue for you.
Only other thing I'd like to see is limited to 6 plants. I don't think we want to have medical dispensaries in a residential neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jan?
Hello, my name is Jan Wolf. I live at 10375 West Idaho Place. The city of, I want to thank you for addressing this issue, bringing it to a wider view of people's attention. On December 1st of 2014, we had a medical marijuana grower move in next door to us, right next to us. Excuse me. Oh, I'm sorry. Since on December 1st of 2014, we had a medical marijuana grow in right next door to us. There are 99 plants that are growing in this residence. Since then, in talking to the neighbor relations guy, we have been told that he has put in filtration systems. We can tell when he's not got them turned on, or when he hasn't got the charcoal filters running, or something's going on, because we do smell that. I have had health issues since he has moved in. I have been to the physician. It's interesting that a medical marijuana plant is supposed to help and improve people's lives. I do believe that for some people it does. For me, it has done the opposite. I have sinus problems. The particulate matter that is released into the air when he does not have anything turned on is causing me to have sinus infections, headaches, you name it. Anything that's related to an allergy. As my husband stated, we've had to put in some expenses to try to help increase our living and make it a greater living. I've had to tell my employer the reason why I smell like a skunk, because I live next door to a person who has 99 plants. I park my vehicle outside in my driveway, and I go to and from work with my windows down to help air out my vehicle, to help air me out so I don't smell so bad, so I can help, my sinus problems. So I do wish you would do something about the odor in the ordinance, and I also agree with the fact that I do think it needs to be down to 6 per residential dwelling. Anything that can be done, anything that you guys can help us would be great. We've exhausted our resources with the neighbor relations officer because he says his hands are tied. We've tried to fight several ordinance with the city of Lakewood. Some of the responses we got back said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we can't do anything at this time." So we do wish that something would be done, so when we do say, hey, there is something going on in our neighborhood, that there is a law that would help back our city of Lakewood people to mitigate this and to improve everyone's living, quality of life in their neighborhoods. I feel like I've become a hermit in my own home since December 1st of 2014.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else in chambers wish to comment on the proposed ordinance? No, you may not. Ma'am?
My name is Emily Buckley. I live at 1205 South Ingalls Street. That's in Ward 3. And I have a 2-year-old daughter. Imagine that you're reading your 2-year-old niece or maybe your daughter a bedtime story. You stand up and you get a waft of skunk stench. And you realize that it's coming from probably your next door neighbor. And so while I support this ordinance completely. I do echo the public comment of my fellow citizens in that we would like to go ahead and have some stronger ordinance that follows some of the recommendations that have been adopted by Arvada and Aurora. Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else?
Mr. Otten.
Ladies first.
My name's Carolee Cohen, and I live at 40 South Lamar, and I have people growing pot next to me. And I guess I'm a little naive. I didn't realize that skunk smell was the marijuana. Not only that, but what is going on next to me, I've been fighting ever since the people moved in last spring with noise and whatever. They built a big structure in the back that was supposed to be for their marijuana. The code people came and told them it didn't have a foundation and was too high, and that they sent me an email telling me that. They said they gave them 2 weeks to remove it, and it's still there. And so I thank you for anything that you can do to make life more livable.
Thank you. Jim.
Mayor and City Council members, I want to actually thank you and the city staff, especially Tim Cox, who've put this ordinance together. I believe this ordinance will be very effective in resolving a lot of the problems associated with home grows, and I've studied this issue for over 2 years now, and I think the city is taking the right direction to correct a serious problem. I've heard many of these complaints. In fact, some of the complaints here tonight are new for my list of people who've complained, and I think it's important to acknowledge the efforts of the City Council and especially the city staff in putting together an excellent ordinance. I think it will be very effective in blocking many issues. And I think one concern, again, as expressed here, is the odor issue. And it's difficult with something where there's a higher number of variables to come up with a section of an ordinance that can deal with this. And there's something that's common in a lot of environmental ordinances, and that is that you make a prescriptive decision or pass a prescriptive ordinance. So if a person complies with a specific prescription regarding filtration or ventilation and those sorts of things, they are in compliance. And that if that part of the ordinance is carefully documented and incorporated into it, it may resolve the odor issue. If it doesn't resolve the odor issue, then you could perhaps go back and take a look at the issue once again if you continue to get substantial complaints. I think the cut to 12, the plants will substantially reduce the odor, but we're talking about plants that have the state of Colorado has an average of 17.1% THC in its plants, and the odor is due to that extremely high THC content plus the other volatiles that are associated with the THC. So we're not dealing with a situation of 1995 where it was about 3 to 4% THC where the plants were not so odoriferous. I think you can anticipate that odor will continue to be an issue. If you take a prescriptive approach, ventilation and filtration, then you might be able to come up with something that people can comply with in a residential setting and then continue to monitor the situation from there. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Anyone else? All right, we'll close public comment. We'll start council conversation with a motion. If I could ask Council President Harrison to at least read the motion into the record.
Ordinance O 2015-15, and ordinance, is this what you want me to read, or the motion?
Just the motion.
The motion.
Okay.
Sorry.
I misspoke.
Thank you. He had me confused there for a minute, and it worked. I move for the adoption of Ordinance O 2015-15 on second and final reading based on the findings of fact.
Second. All right, we have a motion and a second. I'll start with Councilor Barraway, who was the first light to go on, but I do just want to thank everyone for coming to the microphone. And certainly, we all hope that this ordinance, however it winds up, addresses, remediates, mitigates, eliminates those very extreme examples that we're talking about. I mean, the difference between 99 plants and 12 plants, or an outdoor backyard grow and potentially 6 plants indoor, whatever the number is. Obviously, we want to fix this problem too, and that's why we're addressing this tonight. And thank you for coming out, Councilor Barraway.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Councilor Cox, as well. I had a constituent ask me a question when I mentioned to him the idea that would have to be enclosed, could not be in a detached, had to be in an attached garage. And the question was, well, what if you have, people have the codes on the outside of their doors, the garage doors, that you can plug in the code and you can open and get inside. Does that count as being locked? Or how do you have the garage door or the actual door where the cars would go in be considered locked?
Well, I think the key is that the per state law, the cultivation area itself has to be locked off. So it's not enough to put it in an enclosed area like a garage. You'd have to have a space within the garage that would be enclosed and locked.
Okay, thank you. That was a question that I needed to ask. In terms of the cultivation and processing, where the language said perceptible from outside, I know last time at the study session I was kind of concerned about the issue of odor, because how do you know whether it's the plant or it's somebody smoking, which they can legally do on their front porch, on their back porch? I don't know. Apparently people around my house must not be either smoking or growing, because I don't smell it. What we really are smelling are skunks. Is there a huge difference in the smell, the odor, from someone who's out smoking versus someone whose plants are flowering at a certain time?
I defer to
the chief. Well, good, because my next set of questions for the chief anyway. So perfect timing.
Thank you. Yes, there is a distinct difference in odor between plants that are flowering and during the cultivation than the smoking. And the reference to a skunky smell is an apt description of what growing marijuana plants might smell like. The smell of the being smoked marijuana has a sweeter, smoky scent to it.
Okay. So of the 30 or so complaints, Chief, any ideas to what the range was of the amount of plants that might have been at the various locations?
We had, over the last year, and this was in response to a question I think Mayor Murphy had at the last study session on this, we had 26 complaints that we were able to track. I need to qualify that somewhat by saying that some of the tracking organizations like the West Metro Drug Task Force didn't actually start tracking these until this year. So we're not actually going back an entire 12 months, but we get a sense of about 2 to 3 complaints a month. We had anywhere from a couple hundred plants all the way down to 2 plants in these complaints. The couple hundred plants was the one that was referenced earlier that had also the electrical problem.
So the 2 plants, do we know if it was in a inside or growing outside?
That was an issue where the plants were growing outside in a multifamily housing development. When the agents responded, they asked the grower to move them inside, which they did.
And have there been any further complaints from that location?
No, there have not.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for now.
Okay, Councilor Johnson, and then the lights went on Harrison, Quinn, Paul, and Coop.
Thank you, Chief. I'm also concerned about the odor. That's the biggest complaint that I hear about. My concern is that if we have 12 plants, and I'm hoping that maybe the council will look at 6 plant limit as we go further with this. We don't want a government that comes in to count how many plants. I understand that. The enforcement on this gets very tricky. But if people are growing more than what our ordinance says, they will be venting it outside, and that might be the one indicator for us to understand that there is more going on in that house. And that's That's one, I think, viable reason why we should be looking at odor as part of this ordinance. Number one. Also, and I'm not sure if you're the correct person to ask this or not, I noticed in the ordinance it was talking about definitions, and one of them said enclosed, and it said permanent or semi-permanent area covered and surrounded on all signs. What exactly is a semi-permanent area? How do we define that?
Well, that definition itself came from state law, and there may be further background to understand what each of those terms means, but I think what we're talking about is, avoiding a fabric sort of cover over something. Frequently with zoning regulations, we have people who cover a vehicle with a tarpaulin, and that's not the same as having a structure around it by any means. It has to be lockable, so some sort of material and configuration that can be locked. And so that gives us some clue as to what that's going to look like. I mean,
because it sounded like the definition was permanent or semi-permanent, included both of them. Am I misreading this?
No, I think that's correct. And I'm not sure what to tell you except that nothing is permanent, right? I mean, to a degree,
I'm
there's
just wondering if
some
maybe
flexibility there.
So that's in state law. Would it be appropriate for us to pull semi-permanent from that definition?
I would, if we can come up with a definition of permanent that we can all understand and that can be enforceable, then I'd be fine with that. I think that it's, whenever possible, we like to stick with state law in this area because there are so many provisions that are already covered by the state, and we don't want to be inconsistent with them. But if there's a way of defining the term more to the council's satisfaction, we can look at that.
Because when we look at an enclosure and we're talking about plants only in a residence, an enclosure to me sounds like brick and mortar or wood rather than.
Well,
talk to me, Tim. I'm getting lost.
Sure. Think about. Perhaps the most common situation or the easiest situation for compliance would be a closet that locks. You got a door and a lock on it, and it's a framed space.
Right.
You don't have to do much of anything else except close the door and turn the key. That is what, permanent, semi-permanent? I'm not sure where that fits on that spectrum, but I think it meets the definition of an enclosed, locked space.
Well, it's hardwood around it or hard.
Right.
Semi-permanent to me does sound wishy-washy kind of. I don't know. That's just me.
Okay.
But I'd like to see us actually, if we can, strike the semi-permanent. And then also on page 3, under enclosed lock space, it says, if a person under 21 enters a residence, a person must ensure access to cultivation site is reasonably restricted. Talk to me about the word reasonably.
I think that comes down to the context of a home where no one under 21 lives full time. If you have someone in the house, you need to be able to keep them away from the product in the enclosed locked space. I think the recognition is that if you have a home with no one under 21 and someone comes temporarily just to visit, you need to keep them away from that area, but you're not building the permanent structure because your nephew is coming over for the afternoon. So I think it's a reasonable restriction. What can you do to prevent that person from getting into that area without requiring, major construction?
Do you have an example of a reasonable restriction?
I would. I don't know if the police have encountered this situation, but I would say, again, a closet that locks, a room that locks. If you can move the plants to that location, or have them in a location that can be enclosed for short periods of time. Again, in the law we use terms like reasonable when we need it to be open to interpretation in a given situation. It's not going to be defined specifically. It's under the circumstances, was this a reasonable thing to do?
Is it possible then to put, instead of reasonable, under with lock and key? Or it is possible.
Sure, it's absolutely possible. I'm thinking about, there are circumstances where you could lock a room that may or may not be as secure as you'd want it to be. But again, the reason for a word like reasonable is because every home, every setting is going to be a little bit different, and you have to have some recognition of the circumstances. Chief?
I would concur. When I was listening to the description and when I was reading the proposed ordinance, I was envisioning a bedroom door, an interior door, which may not have the same security level of an exterior door, maybe a basement door that would be locked, a closet that would be locked, and the homeowner takes the reasonable steps to make sure that that is secure. However, it's not nearly as secure as like an exterior door might be when you lock your door and leave. So I envisioned reasonable. I didn't find it difficult to interpret that, nor given the number of technologies that are out there with locking doors, I don't know that we'd want to be as restrictive as lock and key, because there's a variety of ways that doors can be locked through codes and even some fingerprints and everything else.
Yeah, I think that the key is that, pardon the pun, but the key is that we have a greater responsibility on someone who has someone in the house that needs to be kept away from it. And then you have to create the space or use a space that is permanent, or as the law says, semi-permanent. We can't expect as much from someone who doesn't have that person living in the house. So it would be reasonable under the circumstances to where you wouldn't lock off that area normally. If you have to lock off the entire basement or bedroom or bathroom or closet for the time that person's there, that would seem to be a reasonable reaction to the circumstances.
Okay. Also, when I was reading, we were talking about compliance with codes, things like fire, plumbing, electrical, that kind of thing. What is the penalty if there's not a compliance?
I'll invite Janet to jump in if I mischaracterize any of this, but these are become offenses like other provisions of our code, subject to the same fine structure that's available through the municipal court.
Okay. And it seems like we talked about this, about a license to grow, to register with this, with the city. How did that end up?
I think where we talked about that was that we can't impose a limitation on the right to engage in a behavior that the state law allows. State law lets us license the businesses, but does not provide for a licensing of individuals to engage in this activity, and so I don't think we could do that either.
Okay. Well, I would just hope that this council has the will actually to look at including odor the way that some of the other municipalities have. I think it's appropriate. I'd also like to see us reduce the number of plants to 6, the same way that Boulder has done. I don't know if I need to make an amendment for that or what, but I'd like to see us at least have some more discussion on odor and bringing down the number.
Let's hear from all the other lights that are on here, other council members, and then we can move towards one or more amendments. So next is Councillor Harrison.
I have a couple of questions. I think this is for Chief Paletta. If one of my neighbors just decided to get angry with another neighbor, can they just call it in and assume that? What kind of cause do you have to go knocking on a door?
Well, that's a great question, and it is a broad question in terms of our response. The numbers that I cited earlier were our follow-up, where we actually determined that there was some level of a marijuana grow.
The 30, correct?
It's actually 26.
Okay, sorry.
There were some redundant numbers, so we actually had to search 4 different sources to figure out where the calls were being received, whether it's the city manager's office, the police department, the drug task force, and then how many of them were redundant. So ultimately we determined that we believe there were 26 separate calls. Each one of those had some level of marijuana growth. And this is where we don't have 100% accurate records. In the vast majority of those calls, those grows were in compliance with state laws or had the appearance of being in compliance with state law. And again, we mentioned at the study session, particularly as it relates to caregivers, there's some ambiguity. You heard testimony this evening about people growing 99 plants in a residence, and under certain conditions that would be in compliance with current state law. That's actually what this ordinance is designed to address. So how do we respond? Oftentimes, the indication of an odor when we arrive on scene, many times it involves simply knocking on the door and talking to the residents and explaining to them what the complaint is. I can say of all of the 26 complaints that we've tracked for roughly the last year, not one of those resulted in the filing of criminal charges. The goal of the police department during these investigations was to gain compliance because of much of the ambiguity that is around some of the marijuana growing laws at a state level and the fact that there isn't currently restrictions in residential grows. Our goal was to gain compliance. So even if we determined that they appeared to be out of compliance, our goal was to ask them to come into compliance, and then we would re-verify that. The example earlier of the home that was actually authorized for 99 plants but had close to 200 plants, within a matter of a few days, that home was in compliance with the 99 plants.
Good. Second question, and this is probably a Tim question, how did we come up with a maximum of 12 plants? Where did that come from?
2 times 6.
Okay.
Wise guy. He's a wise guy.
Even Durango math can come up with that.
Pushes the limits of my math ability. As we said in the going back to the first medical marijuana enactments, it was recognized that a caregiver could have 6 plants for each of 5 patients, that being a reasonable number for a person's use. Remembering that people, the people we're talking about who grow in residential areas are, in some cases, medical patients or caregivers as well. So we still have that to account for. So that sort of created kind of a baseline for what one person can reasonably expect to have. Keeping in mind that if there ever were a challenge, we want to be able to have some basis to defend the number. We didn't pull it out of the air. We said we tied it to the number that was used previously. And then the recognition that there can be more than one person on a property who has the right, and someone over 21 who has the right to use it. 2 takes us to 12, and at that point it starts to feel like anything more than that is becoming excessive and more likely to have an impact. And then, quite simply, the structure that we've talked about, or at least the limit of 12, has been used in a number of other jurisdictions, and there's safety in numbers. If there's been an enactment like that or a number of them, we feel a little bit safer about the defensibility of that number.
So just to make sure that I understand, when police department knocks on that door, next door, or 3 doors down, and they find 15 plants, that's 3 too many. The max anybody would ever have would be 12 plants in their home.
That's the proposal.
And the growing structure, the attached growing structure, the locked facility would only have 12 max as well, correct? Or only 12 right. Total.
If you live in a place where someone under 20 lives, then you have to keep those plants in the enclosed locked space. If you live in a place where there's no one under 21, you have to be able to secure it when that circumstance arises. But in either case, the limit is 12.
Okay. And then my last question, thank you. Mm-hmm. My last question is, in the other jurisdictions that have the filtration, do they have enough numbers behind it that they know that it works, that it's able to actually keep the smell away, and does it meet that criteria?
I don't know that. Janet, do you have any contact? We're only aware of one jurisdiction.
It's just Thornton.
And it was only passed within the last couple of months.
So
they haven't had a lot of experience. We don't know what research they might have done beforehand or what kind of system is required. Right. It's not that specific in their actual ordinance language.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, councilors.
Sorry, Mayor, may I follow up on one of Karen's questions? So,
quickly, please. Yeah.
Sure.
Tim, she had mentioned the attached, but what about if there's an accessory dwelling unit, you have two separate living compartments, you could have 12 in one and 12 in the other. Is that correct?
Yeah, if they're two primary residences, then they each are subject to the same 12 plant limit.
Okay. Thank you.
And how many accessory dwelling units do we have in the city of Lakewood right now? 0.
Approximately 0.
Exactly.
0 that have been applied for a permit.
Yeah. All right. So Councilor Quinn, Paul, Kellen, Coop, Roybal.
Thank you. So as I mentioned last time, I was kind of struggling with the idea of whether it would be best to look at limiting the number of plants further to 6 plants rather than 12 plants to try to address the odor issue, rather than getting into ventilation or having some kind of an odor enforcement provision in the ordinance. What I'm wondering is there any policy reason or argument against limiting it to 6 plants?
So you want me to point out the vulnerabilities in our ordinance if we...
Well, I guess on the one hand, I'm struggling with whether it's a logical approach. Does limiting it to 6 plants reduce the potential for an odor problem? But then the other question is there some strong argument against limiting it that we can talk about here?
I guess I'd answer it this way. Without much science behind it, I would say reduce the number of plants, it's going to reduce the potential for odor. Is it still likely to leave the property if you don't have a ventilation system or some other controls in place? I don't know. Chief, I don't know if you have a comment on that.
I think you hit on staff's intention of avoiding the subjectivity of an odor ordinance by addressing it through the limitation of the number of plants. In terms of the difference between 12 and 6, I think that was staff's. We've only heard from people who've had negative impacts from this tonight. I think staff's attempt was to weigh a legal product in Colorado and people's legal right to grow that product with the impact that it has on its surrounding community. And that's where we landed on 12 as opposed to 6, thinking that in many homes there are 2 adults that would have a legal right to grow 6 plants.
And I guess in further answer to that, Counselor, I'd say we know this. We know we can't set it at 0. So what is the number that's going to protect surrounding properties from the impacts? It might be 2, it might be 8, but obviously we know that it's not going to be the same number in every circumstance, depending on the proximity and other factors. So just as we have what we think is a rational basis for the 12, well, that rational basis started with the number 6, and so I think there's a foundation there to say, yeah, well, 6 per person, but 6 plants has a lot of potential impact, and so we're going with that figure. I think that's a more rational explanation than any other number we could come up with in that range. There's at least something tied to it, and pointing out that while the medical marijuana law allows each individual to have up to 6 plants, that really didn't necessarily take into account that you could be talking about a situation with multiple people in one location in a residential setting. And so to the extent we have the power to control impacts on public health and safety, that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you. I appreciate that answer. What I'm thinking at this point, just so everyone else knows, is maybe a wait-and-see approach is the best one. Maybe we go with the 12 plants and see what happens, because right now we frankly don't know. If we get complaints, if it turns out to be a problem, ordinances are not written in stone forever, and we can always go back and amend it if it turns out we do have a problem. Anyway, that's just what I'm thinking at this point. Thank you.
Before we go to Councilor Paul, I want to just take a moment to try to put this in a broad perspective. We have a community problem that we want to try to solve with this ordinance. It's a problem that's been defined by 6 folks tonight, And I think in each of those 6 cases, we heard about an extreme number of plants. I heard 200 and I heard 99. Again, we're talking about potentially 12 here, which is a far cry from 99 or 200. So we've heard from 6 folks, and in 9, we have 70,000 households in the city of Lakewood, and in 9 months we've had 26 complaints. So, just to kind of scale this thing, we have a problem we will address and we will solve, but the question becomes, how far do we want to go to solve a problem that thus far hasn't been that pervasive by any fair definition of that word. So that's where I think we're back to this word reasonable, that our staff team has tried so hard to, not just the legal definition of reasonable in the ordinance, but also a reasonable approach to this challenge that we have. And I think you've done a great job. All right, Councilor Paul.
Thank you. When this takes effect, will it give relief to the folks that we've heard from? I mean, will it go into effect and people that potentially are growing large home grows right now will have to come into compliance? And how long is that time frame for them to come into compliance?
We have an ordinance that, if adopted, will have a 30-day effective period, and there's I see no reason to. With the last major zoning rewrite, remember that we had it took legal effect, but it didn't become effective for another 3 or 4 months. We're not proposing that be the case. We think when the ordinance takes effect, it ought to be enforceable as of that date.
If this passes, there's some relief in sight for folks that are
certainly the situations we heard of tonight with the large numbers of plants, the outdoor growing, the inadequate temporary structures that were used. Those situations would squarely fall outside the ordinance and would be remediable.
And just to follow up on what Councilor Quinn was talking about, I think that's fair to say, a wait and see approach, but even taking it down to 6 might be a better option to have that period of some time to look back and see if 6 did bring us down, or if it stays at 12. I'm not exactly. I mean, we have a couple different options we've heard from. Now we have one commercial grow in the city that has the carbon filters, and they're on a much larger scale, but they've had trouble as well. So I mean, it's a process that inherently, by its nature, is smelly.
Well, if I could comment on the wait and see approach, and believe me, this is the decision of the council, the policy decision about the number of plants. We've talked about the legal basis for either of those numbers. One way to look at it is if you go with 12 and you find that the number of complaints doesn't really go down, you're still getting complaints about odor, you're still getting problems like that, you have the ability to cut it back and say, well, obviously 12 is too much for a residential setting, we're going to reduce it. If you go to 6 and you don't have complaints, if it works, if people are not talking about the odor, well, we don't know if that would have worked with 12 or not. So it's sort of like the real-life classroom. We get to see what happens with 12, and if there is still the impact that we're trying to prevent, you can reduce it. Having said that, again, we've supplied what we think is a rational basis for either of those numbers, and whatever the council settles on, we'll be able to work with.
All right, Councilors Kellen, Coop, Roybal, and Johnson.
Okay, just a couple questions and comments. As Councilor Johnson was talking about the permanent versus semi-permanent structures, I did a little search, and one of the things I realized is that semi-permanent structures can be pretty permanent. If you look at the accessory classrooms that you see in a lot of schools, those would be semi-permanent structures. So I think that gives you kind of a better idea of what that probably would be interpreted to mean under that circumstance. On the odor issue, so those municipalities that do include odor, is the odor is a violation in and of itself, or is it just can it be set up to provide the level of cause needed to get a warrant to enter a property?
The codes that we've looked at, the ordinances we've looked at from other jurisdictions, make it a violation to have the activity, the odor, be perceptible off the property. So it's a violation if that can be proven to be the case. At the same time, I think what we're seeing in practice is, law enforcement is responding to complaints about the odor, and they're investigating the circumstances, and they're deciding to visit one property or more than one property and determine where the problem is emanating from. It may or may not be easy to figure out which property is the source, and then if you're not given access to the property by the occupant, well, now you need to use it, as you said, as a tool of getting in to find out if there's some other violation inside. But as written, let's assume that there's a 12-plant limit in one of those jurisdictions. As written, it wouldn't matter if you had more or less than 12 plants, if you were in compliance with the 12-plant number. If the odor was leaving the property and it was perceptible, that is written to be a violation all by itself. But it also can be used as a mechanism for getting into the property and checking for compliance with the other restrictions.
Okay. Yeah, and my understanding is only half. It sounded to me that the odor occurs more when the plant is blooming.
That's correct.
And so only half of the plants are allowed to be blooming at any period of time. So you've knocked that down some. Yeah, I worked some with odor ordinances and odor issues up in northeast Denver around industry up there, and they are very, very difficult to deal with. And it is very subjective, and in that situation, they're a little higher up, so you really, it's difficult to figure out where it comes from. But I know that meat packing place up there, the rendering facility was pretty stinky for a while. And when I look at this, our purpose here is, it seems, is to limit what looks to be commercial production of marijuana in these residential facilities, and while not. And I would look for the least restrictive laws that's consistent with our purpose here. And so I would support having the 12 marijuana plants and reevaluating it in the future if there's still a problem with it, if there's still odor emanating. Because I would expect the odor is very dependent on the strain of plant you have as well, because they all seem to smell differently from what I can tell.
I'm no expert on that, but I would agree with that comment.
I'm going to make just a little comment on we have the issue about locking, having a locked room when you have children under 21 in your residence, and I talked to our city attorney earlier about that, and they did come from state law, so I'm not going to suggest doing anything about it, but it's curious when you think about the intention of Amendment 64, which was to try to regulate it similar to alcohol. And as far as I know, there is no regulation requiring anyone to lock up their liquor at home. And I know from personal experience that it's a lot easier to sneak that stuff when you're a kid. You don't really notice a little water in that bottle of vodka. Mom and dad won't, at least. But when you're dealing with a cultivated plant and the product is this one big bud at the top, if your kid starts sneaking it, you're going to notice that. So there is some inconsistencies, I think, in how we deal with our alcohol and our marijuana and how we think about this. Although we have inconsistencies in our alcohol laws as well, where I can make beer and wine at home, but I can't distill liquor at home. So there's a lot of inconsistencies. There's a lot of issues out there. My concern is that we deal with the problem that we have right now, which is massive overproduction in a residential area. And I believe that this ordinance does a really good job of dealing with that problem without potentially going too far. And like it was said earlier, we're never stopped from going back in. I personally won't be going back in and making changes, but there are many of you who will still be on this council and will have every opportunity to make this law stricter if and when it's deemed necessary to do so. So, thank you.
All right. Thank you. I hope there's no teenagers out there listening that learned a new trick tonight. Not that we didn't know that trick. as teenagers. Okay, Councilors Coop, Roybal, Johnson, and Barroway.
Just one question, and I'm going to look towards the chief. Am I correct in assuming that your filtering system, if you had one, would be a different size if you had a small number of plants or a large number of plants?
I would assume so. I'm, again, not an expert in particularly residential filtration systems. Councilor Paul referred to a very commercial filtration system that is very robust and still doesn't eliminate 100% of the odor.
Mr. Cox, any idea?
Yeah, again, we've only encountered one jurisdiction that's attempted to do it. They only did so recently, and so we don't really have any results to look at as to whether it's working, whether people are complying, and whether that is reducing the impact. We'll certainly keep tabs on that. We'll stay in touch with Thornton. And
thank you.
Okay. Who was next? Councilor Roybal, Johnson,
I think my questions were answered, so right. I'm going to pass.
Thank you, sir. Councilor Johnson, Barroway, and Harrison.
Thank you. In some ways, this is extremely tricky because we are looking at an ordinance of 12, maybe 6 plants, and hopefully people will come into compliance when the ordinance is there, but they're not registered. I mean, so really, how do we know? And none of us want a government where people are going to come in and start counting your plants without due process. I guess I personally weigh on doing it a little bit more strict with 6 plants and just do it right the first time.
Councilor Barroway.
Thank you, Mayor. I just what I'm hearing is we're trying to find a balance between somebody's constitutional right that was given to them by the voters of the state of Colorado to be able to grow marijuana against the rest of us that maybe have sensitive noses. So, for example, I don't necessarily like to drive into Golden when Coors is brewing. I don't like that smell. It makes me kind of queasy and upsets my digestive systems and everything else. I just don't like the smell. So for someone, who doesn't like the smell of beer, someone doesn't like the smell of tobacco, someone doesn't like the smell of curry, there's so many things that can be offensive to other people that are in our day-to-day life in the state of Colorado, and that unfortunately also includes marijuana and the smell of that. So trying to find that balance, to me, I think that with 26, and I don't know how many of those were more than, I know I asked you what was the lowest, and it was 2 plants. And the highest was 200. I didn't kind of ask for what the average was. Is there an average? No.
I don't have an average.
Okay, it's cross.
Actually, the SLUs provided an average, and I'd have to go through my notes, but I think it was around 20 plants, 25 plants. Was
to cause a complaint.
That was an anecdotal survey of the sector liaison agents who had responded on these calls.
Okay. And the 2 plants was in the multifamily residential area, which is problematic. So what I see there is what we're trying to balance those constitutional rights versus the being kind to your neighbors and sometimes having that conversation. In terms of compliance, we don't ask people for a license other than they have to be 21 to be able to purchase alcohol. So trying to get them to be licensed to be able to grow a plant seems a bit extreme and a little bit over government. You already know where 26 places are that maybe you could just knock on their door and say, by the way, the law has changed and you need to be down to 12 if that's the number. So I'm more comfortable with leaving it where it's at. Give us a chance to see if by having it enclosed, indoors, locked, and no more than 12 plants gives us a bit of that balance, because I agree if their households have 2 or more adults, somebody's going to say, you took away my constitutional right as an adult to be able to grow 6 plants of my own. 12 seems to be a rational number to start with. And if we do continue to have complaints and it's at 12 plants, different story at that time.
Councilor Harrison?
Well, you almost had me convinced, Cindy. Mm-hmm. But one of the things that I would like to ask is if, and I think this is a question to Tim, if we were to pass this evening, could we also make it mandatory that in a year from now that we would review the numbers again, and if we feel like that we need to implement filtration and or reduce the number of plants further, that we could do that? I want to make it mandatory. I don't want to make it voluntary.
Yes, I mean, talk about permanent and semi-permanent. Every enactment that the council undertakes is, as an ordinance, becomes the law. But you have the power to adopt ordinances that change the law. So you can indicate that it is the intention of the council or the plan of the council to take this up again in October of 2016 to review whatever, and that's as permanent as it gets. Because the council can certainly change it in between, but you can indicate that that's the goal.
Well, one of the things that I keep thinking of is I don't use this, so this may sound really hard, but there are plenty of places that the additional could be purchased if they needed it. So it doesn't seem like the elimination down to 12 plants is a real hardship, potentially down to 6 in some certain cases, I guess, might be. I kind of like 0, but again, that's just Karen. So thank you.
Now that pesky Constitution gets in. Yeah. Councilor Shakti.
All right. So first, I want to just go back to whatever we do and all the nuances here. We all agree that we're addressing these outrageous situations. And we haven't, we heard some about some outrageous situations today in public comment. We didn't hear in the study session, there was reference to a situation where someone had done their own wiring and they were grounding through the gas pipe. So there are big deal things happening, and we're all agreed that we are definitely addressing those. In terms of this and the next marijuana discussion, I've asked a lot of questions to police and legal, so thank you for being patient with me. So as to the issue of odor, I actually have worked some with hog farms that have suburbs built up around them. And so I can also attest to how difficult the odor issues can be when it comes to enforcement. And I'm struck by our chief of police's plea when he says this isn't something we can do because we can smell. Somebody said here, if there's one plant, you can smell it from a block away. Well, the people are allowed to have 6, and they call and say, smell it. There will be a smell, so what are they supposed to do? So I can see how that is a problem. I think that cutting the number of plants is the best way to address the smell issue because it's something that is tangible. I also think it's important when we're talking about odor to remember that, at least in my understanding, odor can still be used as a probable cause if we think there's too many plants in a house. It's just that the odor itself is not a violation. Is that right?
That would be correct. And I think people that work these cases, Metro Drug Task Force or sector liaison agents, would probably be better experts in going before a municipal judge and saying, I've inspected this many residences. I know what roughly the odor of 6 to 12 plants smells like. I know what the odor of 100 or more plants smells like. And this smelled to me like more than 100 plants. I think you could make a good case for a probable cause under a situation like that.
Right. Thank you. And I think often in those situations, particularly where it gets egregious, nobody is using 100 plants worth of marijuana in their house. And so there would be other signs that could also add to the probable cause. So where people are growing more plants, we're going to see more cars, or we're going to see different wiring, or we're going to see other elements that can be added to the probable cause. Because, and I guess I say that because the issue of permitting, I don't think it's appropriate to permit a constitutional right, but I do see that there's some enforcement issue, and so being able to establish probable cause is important. So all that said, I went and visited a marijuana plant to get a sense of how big it was.
A plant?
There was one plant.
What are visiting hours for a marijuana plant?
And it was pretty big. And I think plants come in different sizes, but sometimes they can be pretty big. And we heard somebody here talk about 8-foot plants next door. So that strikes me both in terms of the impact of the plant and in terms of the quantity of marijuana it's producing for the household to use. And so the number goes to the smell. It also goes to the fact that we have different types of housing in Lakewood. This is a right for people in all these different types of housing, but the number will have more of an effect in some types of housing than others. So for all those reasons, I would like to make a motion to have the number of plants in a single-family house move from 12 to 6.
Second.
So that is a motion to amend the draft ordinance.
Yes.
Right. It would be an amendment to the motion, the main motion that's already on.
An amendment to the main motion.
Thank you.
All right. So we will deal with the amendment first. We have an amendment to reduce the number of plants per household from 12 to 6. We've had a lot of testimony about it. I don't know if we need too much discussion. I will be voting against the amendment simply because of I think we've done a great and very legally defensible job of coming up with the number of 12, and certainly that particular number will limit or even eliminate all of these extreme examples that we've been hearing about from the 6 folks that came forward tonight. So I'll be voting against the amendment, but I might be the only one.
I'm based upon what I said earlier, I'm comfortable with the 12 as a starting point, so I would be voting no.
Okay. All right. Please cast your votes for the amendment to go from 12 down to 6. And the amendment carries 6-4. The nays are Murphy, Kellen, Quinn, and Barroway. All right. What's next? Any other proposed amendments?
Do we need to vote on the full amendment?
We just did.
No, on the.
We want to see if there's any more amendments, and Councilor Johnson's light is on. Maybe.
I guess maybe we'll wait and see what 6 does. I'm still concerned about the odor issue. Because you don't know if somebody's growing 6 or 40 unless they vent it out. And so that is actually an indicator that there's an issue going on. I'd like us to have something that talks about odor. And let me see here. I might even have some language. Okay, how about no discernible marijuana odors be permitted to emanate from a residence engaged in growing marijuana? Because that's really the only indicator we have of what's going on inside that home.
Is that
and the electricity bill.
Is that a proposed amendment?
It is.
All right.
I second it, Mayor.
All right. We have an amendment, and the language reads, no discernible odor may be emanating from the home.
Permitted to emanate from a residence where marijuana is growing.
Okay. And we have a second from Councilor Roybal. I too will be voting against that for the reasons so articulately explained by our Chief of Police. And as Councilor Shakti said, even one plant, remember this is legal in the state of Colorado, even one plant can emanate odor outside of a household. So again, I go back to the standard of reasonableness and enforceability. Councilor Kellen, did you?
Yes, I want to comment on this, and I will oppose this as well because I think it does start to infringe upon the constitutional rights of the people to have those 6 plants. And if one plant makes an odor, ever so slight even, that could be enough to say you can no longer have your rights. So I think that opens us up to lawsuits, first off. And I think it infringes upon rights. And frankly, when my neighbor cooks that sauerkraut, I just want to get sick. But that's still legal too. And at some point, minor annoyances with your neighbors, just you kind of got to let it go. I'm not saying you guys have had minor annoyances. It sounds like you had really major annoyances, but we're dealing with that. And I think going beyond that, we're really starting to infringe upon people's rights, and I'm opposed to that.
All right. Councilor Barraway, Paul, and Harrison.
I, too, would be opposed, given the comments made from our chief of police. And as Karen said, everybody has a different sensitivity with their nose. I mean, I can walk in our house and immediately I can tell if our dogs got into something, and my husband can't smell it. He has no idea. So everybody has a different level of sense of smell. By the way, they can smoke marijuana on their front porch, their back porch. They can be smoking it in their house. And the way that the motion reads says that if it emanates from the household, and they could just be sitting in there having, I don't know, a smoke of however you do that, drag a joint, whatever the phrase is. And that's legal for them to do. And that includes if they went and purchased the product at some store as opposed to growing it in their own home. So to put in an odor ordinance at this time, to me, it is overstepping. We've already, in my opinion, overstepped by going down to 6 plants. Let's give that a try and see if that can reduce the number of complaints. And then, again, it could be amended in the future.
Councilor Harrison, Paul, and Quinn.
Ditto to Cindy's remarks.
Adam?
Yeah, I would echo that as well. And at the 12 plant limit, I was more apt to look at trying to do some sort of odor prevention. But now that we're down to 6, I think it is worth seeing where we're at, and then making sure that there's an intent to revisit this, as Councilor Harrison said. If this doesn't fix what we're dealing with, then we need to look at something else.
All right. Please cast your votes on the proposed amendment. The amendment fails 2-8. The nays are Murphy, Shakti, Kellen, Paul, Harrison, Quinn, Coop, and Veraway. And that amendment was for any odor emanating from the house. All right. Next, any more amendments? If not, any more discussion on the motion? I'm sorry, on the original motion, which is for the now amended ordinance, 2015-15. All right, please cast your votes on the amended ordinance. And it passes unanimously. All right, I want to thank you guys, you worked so hard on this, and I know it was a long time coming. I think we learned why in the study session and tonight. It's a very complicated issue. It's not a black and white issue, and there are very important issues of constitutional rights and limits of authority that I'll use the word reasonable for the third time that I think you all took, and we just solved, I think, the extreme problems that we heard about, and hopefully balanced the rights under the Colorado Constitution at the same time. And that's what we set out to do here, is make good, balanced public policy. Will the clerk please read item 15 into the record?
Item 15, Ordinance 2015-14, amending sections 9.32.010, 9.41.010, 9.41.030, 9.41.070, 9.41.090, 9.43.020, 9.43.030, 9.43.040, 9.43.070, 9.44.030, 9.44.025. Did I miss one? 9.45.020, 9.50.040, and 9.63.020, and adding sections 9.43.025, 9.43.050, 9.44.025, and 9.44.040, and repealing section 9.43.100 of Title IX of the Lakewood Municipal Code pertaining to public peace and safety.
Nicely done. And we'll have a brief presentation from Janet Young.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll provide a brief introduction to the brief presentation. Janet is, again, our police legal advisor, has been for a long time. We'll just leave it at that. and is a resource not only for us here in the city, but for law enforcement agencies all over the place. We ought to get royalties for the times that she spends advising other people or providing information to other departments. And this is one of those ordinances that this happens to contain some marijuana provisions because there was a change in the law and we needed to address that. But there are other provisions as well. It's the kind of thing you've seen pretty much on an annual basis as the law changes. Janet's there to bring us up to date. So she'll go through the amendments to Title IX.
Good evening, Mayor Murphy and council members. As Tim Cox said, this is an ordinance that I come before you with periodically, and it usually has a caption about as long as the one tonight, because I just go through all of Title IX and do changes that have been requested of me, plus ones that are required due to change in legislation, and then also in this situation we have the change due to the adoption of Amendment 64 and allowing for the recreational use of marijuana. The first change we have tonight is really one that was requested by Community Resources, and they've asked to have an expansion on the enforcement authority of their park rangers. They've had some issues with bicyclists, the operation of bicycles, and also with some parking violations that currently they don't have the authority to enforce. So this would expand the park rangers' authority so they can deal with these issues that they confront quite frequently in the parks. I've made several changes to the provisions regarding open containers of alcohol in motor vehicles to comply with changes in state law, and also underage possession of alcohol. That was kind of revamped recently by the legislature, so I've just mirrored those changes in our ordinance that we've had for some years. This past summer, the legislature, in recognition of the problems of human trafficking, have made an affirmative defense to the charge of prostitution, that the person charged is a victim of human trafficking. We have prostitution offenses in municipal court that are prosecuted quite frequently, and so I've added that affirmative defense to our corresponding municipal prostitution ordinance. Then this past session, there was a much publicized amendment to the harassment state statute that addressed the significant problem of cyberbullying, where social media is being used to harass another person. So I have amended, the proposed ordinance amends the harassment provision to outlaw cyberbullying through the use of social media. And then the changes due to the passage of Amendment 64. Our current ordinances do not reflect any of the changes of Amendment 64, so they're really out of date. So the first provision that I've added is one that addresses underage possession of marijuana, and underage in this circumstance is under the age of 21. And it gives the court the authority to order the individual to attend substance abuse program. Persons convicted of a second offense would be required to perform community service. I've mirrored the community service requirements that are in the state statute and also the substance abuse program requirements that are in state statute now. So we have that for possession of under 1 ounce for underage possession of marijuana. And then we have to confront the issue of the public display, consumption, or use of marijuana. It is not illegal to use marijuana on residential property if you're the owner of the property, the tenant of the property, or someone who has permission of the owner or tenant to use the marijuana. That would include, as Councilwoman Barraway has mentioned, the front porch, the backyard, someone on their patio or balcony. So in our ordinance that talks about the public use or consumption of marijuana, I've amended that to kind of address what we're facing now since the passage of Amendment 64, to say that it would be lawful on those private residential properties to be able to smoke marijuana on the front porch. But it makes it clear that it's illegal to use marijuana in a public place, such as a sidewalk, a street, a park, parking lot of a business, those types of places. So it makes a distinction from public places and then the private residential property. City Council had recently passed an ordinance that really filled a void in state law that made it illegal to manufacture hash oil within the city. Well, the state legislature, I think, realized that that was a void in state law, and this past summer made it a Class 2 drug felony to manufacture hash using inherently dangerous substance, which would be such things as butane or propane when making the hash. I'm proposing that we repeal our municipal ordinance because it only makes it a municipal offense to engage in such activities, whereas now under state law it's a Class 2 drug offense, which has a mandatory minimum of several years in a state penitentiary. So those are really kind of the high points of the changes that I'm proposing.
Great. Thanks, Janet, as always. Very tightly done job. All right. Let's have the motion for the approval. And then we'll have council discussion. Well, first let's open up public comment. Anybody wish to comment on the proposed ordinance? Seeing none, public comment is closed. Karen?
I move for the adoption of ordinance O 2015-14 on second and final reading. Sorry.
Second.
All right. Councilor Paul, then Councilor Harrison.
I just had a comment. Ms. Young, you always do a wonderful job. I think this is our 8th year for some of us having this, and you take a very complicated thing and all these different rules and laws and throw it in a 3-minute presentation. So thank you. Nicely done.
Councilor Harrison.
Just one quick question. Again, great presentation. But can a owner prohibit through lease any kind of use or smoking or whatever?
Yes, an owner could do that, but then if the tenant is smoking on the property, that would be a civil dispute that the owner could use for the eviction of the tenant. We wouldn't have our police agents looking at leases to try to determine if it's a violation of the lease. It would have to be something remedied through an eviction.
Thank you.
Councilor Shakti.
2 points. One, just that it's, I think it's good in terms of the messaging to youth. I have some serious concerns with some of the language that's also at the state level, the language. So I think it probably makes sense that it's there, but I still have some serious concerns where it, for impairment, it just uses characteristics commonly associated with marijuana impairment. And it strikes me that those are subtle enough that it's a little bit overbroad. But that said, that's how it is at the state level, and overall, I think it's a good message to youth.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. Thank you, Janet. It was a beautiful presentation. I appreciate it. I think that it's under this area that I read this, and actually this would be for Chief Paletta. It was mentioned in there that a person could use an excuse of having a syringe on their body in order to avoid arrest. Wasn't that under this section as well?
If I may, there is a provision that if an individual who has a syringe on his or her person tells the police when asked, so that the officer can avoid an unnecessary and dangerous puncture by that syringe, that then the individual is not charged with possession of drug paraphernalia. That's a provision that was passed this summer by the state legislature to help try to avoid the horrible dangers of punctures by dirty needles when officers are doing searches.
I understand that, but that was done by the legislature? Okay, because I was wondering how many people game that kind of thing to avoid arrest. Do we have any idea on that?
I don't know that I have an idea. I will say this. The Chiefs Association opposed that bill as it was presented, but it passed in spite of that opposition. We had a similar concern that it might be used as an excuse for getting out of a criminal charge.
Yeah.
But we also see the benefit of knowing if somebody has a needle on them as well.
I understand. Thank you.
Councilor Barraway.
This is just an aside. So when I saw there was going to be changes to Title IX, I wondered if Janet Young was going to take away my scholarship.
Oh, take away what?
My scholarship.
Yeah.
Title IX came into play about the time I went to college, you know. Speaking about a different Title IX, but that's why. Just some levity for the evening.
And your college scholarship was for?
Bowling.
True story. Cindy's the answer to a great trivia question. All right. We have a motion and a second on ordinance 2015-14. We're going backwards. Please cast your votes. And it passes unanimously. Great job, Janet. Thank you. Margie, please read item 16 into the record.
Item 16, Ordinance O 2015-13, amending Chapter 2.53 of the Lakewood Municipal Code relating to write-in candidates and cancellation of elections and municipal election procedures.
I'm ready for a motion. I actually open up public hearing. Seeing none, I close public hearing. Ready for a motion.
I move for the adoption of Ordinance O 2015-13 on second and final reading.
And despite the wording in that ordinance, we are not canceling the municipal election this year. All right, any comment? If not, please cast your votes. And that passes unanimously. Any general business, Margie? None. Nanette? No? None. Any executive report? Nanette?
No.
All right. Mayor and City Council reports? I have none. Councilor Paul?
Certainly. We all have apples up here, and it's not because we're good students. Because this weekend is cider days. So if you have a chance to come out and enjoy from 10 to 5 on October 3rd and 4th, it's a great event for the city of Lakewood. And I would also encourage those folks, and it's been great to see on Nextdoor, check out the Federal Center information. The website and the web page that the city has the historical documents, talks about the process that was implemented in 2005, 2006 to really start having this discussion. So please take a look and let us know what you're thinking and how you feel. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Harrison?
No report.
Councilor Roybal?
No report.
Councilor Barraway?
Mayor Murphy, I'd just like to thank everybody who came out for our last Ward 1 and 2 COPS Council and Community meeting last Tuesday night. And that was my last COPS Council and Community meeting as a city council member, and I appreciate it the last 6 years that we've done that. And it was Councilor Debbie Coop, who helped bring that into fruition. So being able to finish it out with Councilor Scott Coop has been great. Just thank you to everybody who's been supportive of that, and especially to our police department for all their support.
Thank you. Councilor Scott Coop? No? Councilor Quinn?
Thank you. Just quickly, a reminder to everyone out there watching us. The next 2 weeks, we have our cleanup days coming, October 3rd and October 10th from 8 a.m. to noon. On the 3rd, we have it for all homes north of Alameda. On the 10th, all homes south of Alameda. And that drop-off location is going to be the Jeffco Stadium. Yes, so reuse, recycle, and clear out. You can also, as part of the same trip, not to the same place exactly, bring your old tires and your household hazardous waste to the Rooney Road Recycling Center. We will be open all day both of those days. Thank you.
Great. Councilor Johnson, anything?
I'd just quickly like to thank council and staff for bringing this marijuana residential grow forward. A lot of folks have been having some issues with this. I appreciate it. I think we've done some good work with this tonight, and glad that it's finally in place. Thank you.
Thanks. Councilor Kellen? Councilor Shakti?
I have a ward meeting at Sunrise Sunset Monday in a week at 8 a.m.
Great. Anything? Tim?
I just want to reassure Councilor Kellen we're working on the sauerkraut issue.
For the next
Careful,
council.
Tim,
For the
I'm
next
Polish.
council. All right. We are adjourned. Thank you.